Welcome and thanks for joining me for my Royal Pumpkins video. I'm Rhonda Church-Finfrock of Fruitful Life Studio. I'm an IOD stockist in Exeter, California. Here are a few of the pumpkins I hand painted last year and embellished with IOD Decor molds and air dry clay. But this year I'm toning down the paints a bit and choosing a royal pumpkin theme. We'll take you through 3 pumpkin projects using IOD stamps, molds, inlays, and transfers. First up is my Royal Carriage Princess Pumpkin. I'm making this for my granddaughter's birthday. It's in October, she's an October baby, and she does believe that she is a princess. She wears her princess dress every single day. You can see I'm very quickly putting down that first layer of paint, then stenciling. Now I am rolling on paint onto an IOD first generation stamp. Look through your IOD stamps and see if you have a border. I know the Queen Bee is readily available and it would make a lovely border for this project as well. If you do not have an IOD stockist in your local area, you can look at the locator map or visit my website, fruitfullifestudio.com. I drew a pumpkin sketch in the size that I needed and then printed it out to use as a stencil. You could also do this on stencil film or any plastic if you would like to reuse it. I like to just print them out into the scale and size that I need for my project. This pumpkin is going to have lots of layers and lots of texture. So I'm mixing in a little bit of salt wash to my paint. Usually I would do this in a cup or a bowl or a container, mix up a batch, but I just needed a small amount, so I went ahead and just mixed it up on the plate I was painting off of. I'm pouncing that textured paint up and down, trying to create lots of raised texture. Once this is completely dry, I'm going to paint over it with my second coat. I'm getting everything ready for that second layer by planning out my inlay pieces. I am going to turn this pumpkin into a royal carriage. I'm cutting apart the pieces and fitting them to my pumpkin. Then I'll set these inlay pieces aside until I'm ready to apply them. Now that my salt wash layer is completely dry, I'm painting over it with a beautiful creamy shade by Daydream Apothecary. It's from their Cozy Home collection and it's called Comfort Zone. Once that layer dries, I am sanding it back to reveal that textured paint underneath. This is not the usual way to apply an inlay. I will describe that in my last pumpkin piece. Now I'm brushing on a generous coat of DIY liquid patina, getting it ready to take those paint inlay pieces. Liquid patina dries clear and matte, but it's also a sealer. So I'm not going to leave these inlay pieces on as long as I usually would do if I were applying them into paint directly. The usual process for applying a paint inlay is to do 1 coat of paint, let it dry, do a second coat of paint, and then apply the inlays. As soon as those inlay pieces look dry, I am spritzing it heavily with water. I have to add a little bit more just because the patina acts as a sealer. I need to release those backing papers from the inlay pieces. Now I will be adding some detail work by hand painting in shadowing and vines and leaves. I want this all to just flow together so that the inlay looks like it's part of my painting. On to the IOD molds. This will give a lot of dimension and bling to my piece. I am using two different molds, trying to decide which wheel that I like. First, I used the new Blitz mold, and I cut out a circle, the same size of wheel that I would like with a small glass. You can also use a jar, and I'm comparing it to the rosettes mold. I decided on one of the rosettes mold because I love the flow, the circular pattern in the wheel, and it reminded me of the same flow or pattern in the inlay. Now I'm using a piece of one of the baubles mold and I'm trimming it to form the little crown on top of my pumpkin carriage. On to the frames mold. This is where I will put a little picture of my princess granddaughter. I trimmed it to the size that I wanted, and now I trimmed off a little piece of the rectangular mold from that frame set for the base. Now, to connect those two pieces a little bit better, I'm brushing them with a little bit of water. You could also use a little bit of glue mixed with the water to help secure the two pieces together. I sealed the painted portions, not the molds, so that if I made a mistake while painting the molds, I could easily wipe it away. I used Daydream Apothecary's Dream Coat to seal off the paint. I'm giving all these molds a base of a dark color. I'm using Metropolis by Daydream Apothecary. And then I'm going to be brushing everything with DIY Golden Ticket. As I was working on this project, I realized another great mold to use instead of the framed photo would be the IOD Cameos mold. Now to apply the picture of my granddaughter, the princess. First, I'm sealing off the paint with liquid patina. It acts as a decoupage medium as well as a sealer. I'm tracing the pattern with a piece of thin mount, and I printed her picture on some rice paper. Now I'm tracing around it, cutting it out, and applying it to the frame using the liquid patina. As you can see, somewhere during the drying process, I added DIY's dark wax to the entire piece. I should have waited until I was completely done, but I was a little anxious to see how it would all look. I'm adding 2 layers of diamond glaze. This will make her photo extra shiny, almost like she's looking through the carriage window. Now the royal pumpkin carriage is done, and on to the next pumpkin. I am using a 1/4 inch piece of wood cut in a rectangular shape. I started with the same techniques as the first pumpkin. I painted a background layer, stenciled it, and then I stamped on my base, which is the Persephone's End Decor stamp. I painted it, adding different colors and highlights. Now I'm doing one last stamp over the top to give it all the texture and detail. You can tell, I work very loosely as an artist, and I usually don't measure things. Ideally, I should have measured down the center line of the pumpkin. This whole piece is a little off-centered, but I will be fixing that later by doing some shadowing. I did go with a little bit different color scheme for my pumpkin. I painted a layer of salt wash mixed with Summer Crush. Now I'm painted over it again with the Comfort Zone, and I sanded it back. Now I'm using this little plastic tool to dig into the clay paint. If this is difficult for you to do, you can always spritz it with a little bit of water that reactivates clay paint and makes it a little softer. And I'm using the same inlay and the same process as with the carriage pumpkin. Now you can see I'm shadowing out with some watered down Metropolis, shadowing out that left side because this is off balance and not centered, but it really helps heal the eye from looking at that. To finish off this pumpkin and add a little bit of distressing, I am sanding off the edges and corners, and then I will seal the entire thing with dark wax by DIY. Because I've already sealed this pumpkin, I should be able to wipe back most of that wax. And now on to our third and final royal pumpkin. I started this canvas over a year ago and just recently used the Grisaille Toile inlay to place over the pumpkin. This inlay application, I did not use the salt wash layer. I painted the pumpkin in a base coat. Then for my second coat, I used both the Comfort Zone and the Poison Ivy and just painted a second layer and then placed my inlay on top of that second layer without any salt wash. Now I'm removing the inlay in the usual way. I'm spritzing the inlay with water, dabbing it down, and peeling off that lining. You can see because I did not use a sealer product, I directly inlaid it into a layer of paint. It came off much more easily. Usually, if you were using an IOD inlay on a piece of large furniture, you would want to first seal it. As soon as you take the inlay off and it dries, as soon as you take that liner off, you would want to seal it by spritzing it with 50% of the sealer with water, just to get that inlay not to reactivate or smear. But with this small, I'm using a lot of water anyway, and if a little bit smears, I'm okay with that. Now I will be using some of the leaves from the Fruitful Harvest stamp set. I will be making impressions into the clay paint. This is going to give me a general outline of the leaf, and now I am going to apply a generous amount of paint. This is a clay chalk-based paint by DIY. I'm applying it very heavily. I will let it set just a minute. Let it set up just a bit, and then I will stamp the impression of the leaf into the paint. You could use this same technique for painting your own pumpkin. Instead of doing the inlay, you could stamp a pumpkin from the set, apply a generous amount of paint, let it set a second or a minute, and then stamp it again to get all those great lines and details. As I'm stamping these leaves, I'm pressing pretty heavily on this canvas, so I'm holding my other hand underneath to support the canvas so I don't stretch it out. Next step, I grabbed, I think, a pencil, but you could use a stylus or any kind of little tool, and now I'm carving into the clay paint. I'm carving more details. So those main venations in the leaves, I am accenting them by carving them deeper with my pencil. After sealing my canvas with Daydream Apothecary Dream Coat, it's ready to apply my Whispering Willow transfer. I love these transfers because you can cut them into little pieces just like the inlays and use them how you like. Once my sealer was completely dry, I used the stick that comes with the transfer to gently rub on the transfer. Again, I will support it from the back of the canvas so that it does not stretch it out. I decided the mushrooms matched a little bit too well with the pumpkin, and I wanted them to pop a little bit, so I used the Metropolis, watered it down, and made a shadowing effect around the mushrooms. I also accented the moss with the same green that I used in the leaves. After adding some golden ticket highlights and spatterings, I sealed it one last time with the Dream Coat before applying DIY dark wax. My 3 royal pumpkins are now finished. Thank you for joining me. Happy creating, and if you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe.